Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the Bird Notice podcast. This is Ryan here with my co host Billy. This week we'll be discussing the call up of Joey Ortiz, the return of DL Hall, and the O's continue to win 6 straight series, and they've gone 5-2 since we last talked. But, Billy, you said you have an announcement before we get started.
I do have an announcement. I thought about saving it to the end of the episode, but I didn't want it on my mind the entire time, so I figure it's just best to rip the Band-Aid off. So when we were approached about doing this podcast, my first reaction was like, I don't even know this guy. But we got past that, and this week the producers have informed us that we've exceeded their initial projections. So they're happy about that, even though the focus group said that they don't like the Masson app report. But they also said that some listeners have started asking about merch. So the Bird Notice podcast is happy to announce that we've partnered with birdlandsports.com. T-shirts are available. You can just go to the podcast section and you'll see us listed there. Special thanks to Josh for allowing us to join the site. Yeah, so go out and get yourself some T-shirts. I'm going to send them to you right now. I'll send you the link.
Wow, that's awesome. I was not expecting that. I didn't know what you were going to say. I was just hoping it was good. So that is good news. That's really cool.
Yeah, I ordered 3 already, 2 for me, one for the wife.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to take a look. That's very cool. And then when people ask me about it, I can just play it cool. Oh, it's just a podcast. You should check it out sometime.
Yeah, I just sent you the link. They have a lot of good shirts on birdlandsports.com. I also ordered myself a Cano shirt.
That guy's awesome. We'll get into him for sure.
Yeah, I have a theory on maybe Batista's struggles being related to him.
Oh, you think he's a kind of a head case? He hears the footsteps of Cano.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting thought though, because Batista knows how he got the job. He saw Lopez get run out of town, and now this guy seemingly came out of nowhere and has thrown a no-hitter over the course of 2 weeks.
I'm all for using the hot hand. I don't think anybody should be gifted anything in pro sports, Everyone's a professional and you get paid to perform, and not that Felix has been bad. He's been a little shaky at times, but I'm perfectly happy if Cano and Batista can combine to close out games.
Yeah, and it seems like when you get married to using a closer during only save opportunities, you end up leaving Ubaldo Jimenez out there in a do-or-die game in Toronto.
Oh, such a painful memory. Yeah. Also, saves are a completely made up and stupid stat, so I think it's definitely better when you put your best relievers in high-leverage situations, no matter what the actual score or save situation might be.
So we're a month in. Do you have a biggest disappointment on the season?
Biggest disappointment? I wasn't ready for that question, so I need to think about it for a second. Off the top of my head, I would say probably Santander. Just because I do expect a lot from him and he hasn't performed. But like you said, it's only been a month. He has plenty of time to turn it around, but without really thinking about it too hard, he would be my choice.
That was interesting for Stowers to be called up today and just be slotted right into the cleanup spot.
Yeah, that was kind of odd to me. The fact that he wasn't really even on the roster, but then suddenly he's good enough to be cleanup. I see he went 1 for 4, so not a total failure, but it was an interesting decision by Hyde.
And it seems like they haven't trusted him, going back to last season, and all of a sudden. So I'm wondering if Santander is going to lose some at bats.
Like I just said about the closers, whoever's playing well, I'm fine with whoever is the hot bat or the hot arm, which is not really a saying people use, but yeah, whoever's doing well, and obviously the righty lefty matchups and splits and things, put them in.
Especially with these newfound riches that the Orioles have found themselves with, the roster is just squeezed now, and that was not the case previous few years.
It is crazy to be in a situation like that. And I've also thought about when the O's become a legit contender, where will these people slot into the roster? Because obviously on the better teams, they are deeper, and there will be players who don't get a lot of at-bats or don't throw a lot of innings, where if they were on a weaker team, would definitely play a more prominent role. So kind of thinking into the future, and an optimistic future is, where would a guy like Santander or Arias or those players who aren't really cemented and young stars, where are they going to be on the roster, and what will the role be if they're even around?
Yeah, Urias has really grown on me. I feel like him and Mateo have just thrown a wrench into the plans for what their infield was supposed to look like this season.
Especially Mateo. That dude just continues to be awesome.
Yeah, I think if you gave Elias truth serum, he would tell you they totally overachieved last year, and Arias and Mateo have just staked a claim on their spots on this roster right now. And I'm sure he thought this year would be the year they push 500, and you would work in Westberg into second, Henderson at third, and Ortiz at short. But yeah, it's squeezed. It's totally squeezed.
I'm perfectly fine, though, assuming Henderson performs. He's not really been that. I should say he hasn't been particularly good so far, but
He's been
he's
terrible.
22 years old. But going forward, assuming he plays up to expectations for a 22-year-old rookie, I'm perfectly fine with him staying at third and Mateo just being the shortstop. There's absolutely no reason to take that guy out.
Yeah, so Gunnar is my biggest disappointment, my answer to that question. With only 4 RBI, I mean, Ortiz was here for 3 days. He already had 4 RBI.
Right. Yeah.
But if you take away Gunnar's walks, he's 28 strikeouts and 67 official at bats.
Yeah, but walks do count. I mean, looking at his OBP's 364. That's pretty decent for a 22-year-old rookie, no matter what the rest of the numbers say.
He always seems to be on base.
Yeah, and that's all you can ask for. I'd rather he be patient and not hit so well than have like 3 walks on the year and just also not hit well, which is kind of a dumb statement because that's very obvious, but just saying that I think it could be worse is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like if it weren't for his walks and the fact that he's left-handed, I don't know if he would have survived the Ortiz call-up.
Right. Well, it is what it is, and despite some struggles from guys like Gunnar and Santander, the O's are 19-9 and entrenched in second place in the division right now, so can't really complain.
I was surprised to see that the Cardinals sent down their rookie, Jordan Walker, after less than a month.
Yeah, and looking at the standings, the Cardinals are only 10-19, which is very uncommon for them. They're one of the most consistent franchises, it seems like. So I wonder if sending him down was as much a wake-up call to the rest of the roster as it was to actually have Jordan Walker himself work on certain things, because they could send him down. You can't send down a guy like, I don't know, off the top of my head, like Arenado if he's not playing well, which I don't even know the case. So it might be kind of like pulling the goalie when your team's getting completely outperformed, and it's not really the goalie's fault, but you do that as a way to stir things up and make people alert.
Yeah, the NL Central is upside down. I cannot believe the Pirates.
Yeah, that was one of my notes for non-Orioles topics this week, is the fact that the Pirates are 20-9. I think earlier in a previous episode I said I feel bad for Pirates fans because they're always so bad, but so far I'm eating crow on that one because they've been very good.
Yeah, everybody is. Did you see the Drew Maggi story this week? He's been everywhere.
How old is he? Like 31?
33.
33. First hit, right?
Yeah, first hit.
That's really cool.
He was optioned after one of the games, but because there was a postponement, they were allowed to add the 27th player for the doubleheader, so he got in one of those games and got the hit.
Very nice. Yeah, that's a cool story. And the Pirates are one of those teams where I don't think there's anybody who's a fan of another team who would not be happy to see the Pirates have a good season. Especially McCutcheon's back there, right? It would be pretty storybook if they ended up making the playoffs.
It seems like them and the Orioles have been on the same path for since the 70s
I was
almost.
gonna say for like 50 years when they used to play in the World Series against each other.
Yeah, and then they both had their dry spells in the 2000s, and then they started making the playoffs at around 2010, 2012, 2014 in there. And then they both went back down, and now they're back up at the same time.
Yeah, it's as sad as it sounds, the Orioles are pretty similar to the Pirates. I saw a stat the other day. It was a full record of every team and over the last X amount of years, and I should have marked it because I don't remember now. Maybe a decade, and the O's were, I think, second worst in all of baseball. And I just thought about how nice it is to actually be optimistic about them right now and have them playing good baseball at the present as well.
One thing that the Pirates are doing that the Orioles are not is giving out contract extensions. Brian Reynolds just got one, and they gave Brian Hayes one, I think, last year. It's time for the Orioles to start handing out some money.
Completely agree, and I would imagine you would agree also that Agley is at the top of the list for that.
Yeah, he's got to be first. I would have said Gunnar going into the season also, but his struggles, you can temper that right now. You don't want to give a guy a 12-year contract.
No.
Yeah, which the Diamondbacks gave Corbin Carroll the 11-year deal, and he's doing pretty good. I think he got injured last night, though.
Oh, that's a bummer. I know he was really highly regarded. Kind of a five-tool player, right? He's got speed, got some power. Not a very big guy, if I recall, but he's supposedly very good. I saw a clip the other day. Kevin Durant, he's on the Suns now, and he was at a game sitting in the front row by the dugout with a Carroll jersey on. Thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I did see that. I think that's good when the professional athletes in the same town pull for the other professional athletes in town. I always thought it was weird when LeBron was pulling for the Yankees. One year he was just sitting in the crowd with his Yankee hat on. It looked so odd.
In Cleveland, right?
Yep, in Cleveland.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it's cool. I remember a couple years ago the Titans' offensive line was at a Preds game and they were crushing beers. I think one of them might have like poured it off the catfish or something. I might be making that up completely, but yeah, it's always fun, and then the crowd always gets a kick out of it too.
I remember seeing LeBron at the Indians Cubs World Series though, and he looked pretty into it. So he did come around to some extent on the.
It's about time. I can't believe he'd be. I mean, I guess be loyal to your team, but clearly he wasn't if he was rooting for the Indians. After wearing a Yankees cap to their game before. LeBron is an incredible player, but I also think he's kind of a silly person. Don't dislike him, and he's not a bad person, just kind of a goofball that I am not totally on board with.
He's someone I didn't think was any way possible he could live up to the hype, and he totally smashed it. He's still playing, which is insane. For the NBA, you get old really fast.
Yeah, just kind of looking out I should say, from the periphery on the NBA playoffs. I know that there was a guy on the Grizzlies who was talking a lot of trash, and the Lakers beat him. And apparently, this guy I think Dylan Brooks was his name,
Dylan
right?
Brooks.
And he just wasn't giving post-game interviews or anything. Was just totally ducking after talking all this smack about LeBron.
Yeah, if you're gonna talk like that, you should at least answer for it to some extent.
Should we get into other sports, or should we start talking baseball? Because I do, not as exciting as your announcement, but the Bruins just lost in overtime of Game 7. So I saw that happen a couple minutes ago live. They were beaten by the Panthers after the Bruins had a historically good regular season, and they go down in the first round. That was shocking.
Yeah, that's brutal. I would have never picked that to happen. I had them rubber stamped to the finals.
Right. Now it's wide open. So That's why the NHL playoffs are awesome. Um, Speaking of baseball, I do have a quick correction of myself from last episode, and it involves a little trivia question for you. So I mentioned Josiah Gray and how he played at Lemoyne College and Syracuse. I mentioned also that there weren't any regulars to come out of Lemoyne, but was wrong about that. I went back and looked, and they've actually had two guys who've thrown more than 1,500 innings in the majors. Both of them played the exact same time frame from 1984 to 1995. One of them was Jim DeShays, who's currently a Cubs TV analyst, spent a large portion of his career with the Astros. And the other one is a pitcher that you brought up kind of out of nowhere a couple episodes ago. And I'm curious if you might have a guess.
So to Jim DeShays real quick, I remember having a baseball card where he was tossing the ball up in the air, and it was for a record he set. I think it was most strikeouts to start a game. It was 8, I believe.
Yeah, when I was Googling him, that's exactly what I saw too.
Does he still have that record, do you know? Or has anybody tied it?
I don't know. I mean, that's an impressive feat. I don't know if anybody would have beaten that. To beat that, you have to strike out the first 3 innings. That's pretty insane.
So my guess on the other guy, just knowing the random names I threw out there in the month that we've been doing this, I have to say Tom Browning.
You are correct.
All right.
I chuckled to myself because I was like, man, of all people, Billy brought up Tom Browning out of nowhere. And yeah, it turns out Tom Browning and Jim DeShays are the two guys from Lemoyne who've been regular MLB players for a decently long career. So I got to correct myself on that one. But I did think it was funny that you had mentioned the other guy.
Yeah, I think I used to see a lot of Reds games because they played the Pirates so much, and just watching Pirates games living in their market. And I have a bunch of family in Ohio.
Yeah, he was it. So that's my little correction to myself and little tidbit of trivia. So as I mentioned in the intro, the O's went 5-2 since we last talked. The first game since we spoke was a 5-4 win over the Red Sox on Monday. They then lost the second game and took the series finale on Wednesday. So what do you got for Monday's game, the win against the Red Sox?
Okay, so this was the Chris Sale game.
Yes, it was. Got notes about him.
Yeah, I have a full page on Chris Sale. 0 strikeouts on 83 pitches, 0 swings and misses, more importantly. And then while I was watching Chris Sale punch a defensive water cooler, and knowing his other previous instances in Worcester and with the White Sox, I came to the conclusion, I think he's kicked a dog before. I've no.
You can't. You don't want to get Brett Favre, Pat McAfee. You got to say I think. I don't think it's true. I could see it happening.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it's true. If someone told me that Chris Sale kicked a dog, I would believe you.
Yeah, I've also got notes, but another number you didn't bring up is his salary. As I mentioned, with Miguel Cabrera being a dinosaur, Chris Sale is completely washed up now, but he's making $27.5 million this season and next. So as I said with Miguel Cabrera, more power to him. Do not retire when you're getting that much money. Stick around, even if you have an 8.22 ERA with 30 hits and 10 walks allowed in 23 innings, because that's a ton of money that you shouldn't leave on the table.
Yeah, no doubt. So Chris Davis was in that same boat. He did retire. Was it ever reported how that played out? Did they just agree to pay him just to go away?
I was actually thinking about that today for some reason. I'm trying to think about what made me think of that. But they had to have worked out some deal, because Chris Davis wouldn't have just walked away from all that money. I don't know if it's been publicly reported, but I was also thinking about how he and his wife have done a lot of good charitable work in Baltimore, so can't hate on him for that at all. I mean, he definitely went downhill fast on the field, but nothing against him as a person at all. But I do not know what that deal was, but I'm sure they arranged something.
The Orioles kind of get a pass on the embarrassment of that deal because Bobby Bonilla gets all the news once a year on the day he gets paid, but Chris Davis is in the same boat where they're paying him for like the next 10 years.
I kind of think aren't the O's also paying Bonilla though?
Probably. I like Bobby Bonilla. I used to watch him with the Pirates. He was fun to watch.
Yeah, no, he was a good player. I mean, that's why he got those big deals back in the day. But um, I might be wrong. I might be completely wrong. But I thought I heard somewhere that the O's are actually paying part of that.
I wouldn't doubt it. He got traded a lot.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, back to Chris Sale. Do you have any more notes on him? You said you had a whole page.
I do. So Alex Cora and the hitting coach were acting kind of bratty on a bunch of balls and strike calls, and I came to another conclusion that had to be because Chris Sale was just incessantly crying in the dugout while the Orioles were on the field.
It could have been. I know there was. I shouldn't say controversy, but there were definitely some fans who were wondering if Cora was trying to imply that the O's were stealing signs. So I did think it was nice that a day or two after he said, "No, that's not what I was saying," and then he did make sure to mention that he's the last person who should be accusing somebody of stealing signs. So it was nice to see some self-awareness there from Cora.
Yeah, I feel like Chris Sale's attitude is permeated the Red Sox clubhouse, and when I saw Cora's comments, I thought the same thing, that he was insinuating that the Orioles were cheating. But he did have a great walk back, so I'll give him credit for that.
Hey, at least Sale didn't destroy the dugout phone like David Ortiz did.
Yeah,
He,
I
Ortiz
can't Chris
probably
Sale
had to
anymore.
pay the Orioles a whole like $30 for that old landline phone that they had.
Do you have anything else from that game? That's all I have on Chris Sale.
Yeah, I've got some notes more about just what happened, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing that's especially interesting. One thing I really thought was funny was that Kike Hernandez made a nice play on a Cedric Mullins grounder in the seventh, and he spun and threw it right into the umpire's butt. He probably wouldn't have gotten him at first, but it was just kind of an entertaining play.
Yeah, I had that written down too. He's fun to watch.
He's a good, versatile player. Another guy in the Sox I've liked just seeing the O's games this year is Alex Verdugo. I think
Mm-hmm.
he seems to be kind of turning a corner as far as hitting goes. He's got a really good arm. He's a good fielder, and he's also kind of got that swagger and that character that makes baseball more fun.
Yeah, he's been a pleasant surprise on my fantasy team.
And then another note from that is Cano got his first save of the year. We mentioned him. He came into the game with a man on first and no outs. Then he had a balk, so there was a runner on second with no outs with a 1-run lead, and he still managed to get out of it for the win.
So I've heard multiple pronunciations for his first name now. I've heard Yenier, which is what I started out saying, and I've heard other people say. I've heard Yenier, and then Yenier.
I think I've heard Yanir most recently from the O's broadcast crew, but all I know is that it's not Yenie, which I speculated earlier, like Yadier Molina. Uh, it's something Yenier.
On the Mass and All Access podcast, both hosts were saying different names. I felt like they were just trying to cover their bases.
He can't just be named Robinson Cano. Like that's way easier for us.
Maybe we can call him Yanni.
Yanni, okay. I have another bad like name pun for later, like your Sile Gibson, but I'll save that for when it's more relevant.
Speaking of bad name puns, though, Ryan RBIs keeps getting RBIs. He has 6 and 18 at bats.
RBIs. I mean, Kevin Brown was right. It doesn't mean it wasn't terrible, but as I said initially, he might have just been saying that on purpose because he knew it was dumb, and it made me laugh regardless. So I'm happy to call him ORBIs if he keeps getting them.
Yeah, we're here to have fun.
Yeah, so that's kind of all I got on that first game. The second game was the O's first loss in a while. They went down 8-6. I had mentioned that I thought Bradish had some of the best stuff outside of Gibson. I also kind of forgot about Grayson when I said that. So I do think Rodriguez has the best stuff. That was just a brain fart. But he made me look silly because he had a really bad start and just couldn't throw a strike.
Yeah, he made me look silly too. I said he was on the precipice of a jump. Like I specifically said he was on the precipice of a jump, and he went out there and threw batting practice. He was a disaster. 2 1/3, 8 hits, 7 earned, 4 walks, 81 pitches, 12 base runners out of 18 batters.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't throw a strike, so people were just sitting on fastballs once he had to get one over. So that's never a good recipe, and obviously that played a large part in the loss.
Speaking of bad pitching, Dean Kramer was in that first game against the Red Sox. He struggled early and was able to settle down and pitch into the sixth.
Yeah, he did. And then he struggled again yesterday, much worse. So
Yeah.
maybe we can give him a pass on Monday because they still won the game. But yeah, Kramer and Bradish, this was kind of a return to the beginning of the season at the start of this week as far as the starters not looking good and not going deep in the games. On the other hand, the Red Sox on Tuesday threw Corey Kluber, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this. I have a propensity for telling the same story multiple times because I forget if I've said it. But back in the day, I saw Corey Kluber strike out 18 Cardinals in May of 2015 on my only trip to Cleveland. His final stat line that day was 8 innings with 1 hit, no walks, and 18 strikeouts. Fun fact.
Easy. Oh, go on.
I was just going to lay a fun fact on you at the end. The only Cardinals starter that he didn't strike out that day was father of Jackson, Matt Holliday, because Kluber drilled him in the elbow in the first inning, and he left the game. But otherwise, he struck out everybody else at least once.
Speaking of Jackson Holliday, he got promoted to Aberdeen this week, which crushed my dreams of going up to see him in Delmarva this weekend.
Well, I mean, pretty soon he might be in Norfolk for a bit if he keeps it up. And Matt Holliday might be known as Jackson's dad eventually, even though he was a really good player himself.
Yeah, he was really good. It's hard to believe that Kluber won 2 Cy Young Awards.
Do not know. I'll look that up while we're talking. I mean, he's always been a pretty good, one of those guys, kind of like Cano in a way, where everything he throws just moves a lot. Yeah, he has won 2 Cy Youngs in 2014 and 2017.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You are correct. One thing I noted that was kind of silly was after Bradish gave up the grand slam to, I think it was Duran, right? He reminded me of when you're playing MLB The Show and you have a pitcher in that has no energy left and the ball just doesn't go anywhere where you want it to go. That's what Kyle Bradish looked like to me after that, but just in real life.
Yeah, he was brutal. I felt so dumb for saying he was on the precipice of a jump. He started out today pretty well and just totally fell apart in the 5th.
Yeah, I'll have you give that game report because I didn't see it at all, but it sounds like he at least did a little better today than he did, kind of the opposite of Kramer. A little better this weekend than he did earlier in the week against the Red Sox.
Was Austin Hayes hit by a pitch on Tuesday?
That may have been when he tried to bunt and got the ball hit his finger or his hand.
Yeah, so to me it feels like he has an anvil hanging over his head. He pulled up a little lame in that White Sox game, and then, the finger, thankfully, he didn't miss any time.
Yeah, that's always been our concern. I know we've talked about that earlier with Hayes. Very solid player. One of those guys who just seems to have really bad luck or something. But as you said, he did stay in the game. But on a positive note, the final 6.2 innings that game from Baumann, Voth, and Perez, the Red Sox only had 3 hits and a walk and 1 run in those 6.2 innings. So
I asked my biggest disappointment question earlier. I was also going to ask you your biggest surprise of the season. The correct answer is Mateo, right?
yes, because of how good he has been. But, I think there's tape of me saying that I really like Mateo, kind of talking him up. I would say if you don't count Mateo, I mean, I guess you got to go Cano, right? I mean, this dude nobody even thought might be on the roster. He wasn't on the roster to start the year.
Yeah.
He wasn't in people's plans for what the bullpen would look like.
Yeah, and then another guy I think deserves a mention is Bauman.
Bauman has been very good for sure. He every time he comes in, he just seems to get the job done. He did allow an inherited runner, was it yesterday maybe or today to score?
He gave up a home run yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it was. It was two inherited runners, I think, that were on base, and obviously the one that he, it was Nevin who hit that off him, right?
Oh yeah, he got demoted today too. I guess Detroit added Zach Short to the roster as the 27th man, and they liked him so much that they sent down Nevin instead, where he can begin his 10-year AAA career.
Congrats on the homer. You're going down to, was it Toledo?
Yeah, he was hitting 50.050 when he homered.
With a home run. That seems like a very Orioles thing to do. The guy hasn't hit it all year, and then he hits a home run against the O's, right?
So for my 3 stars on Game 2 with the Red Sox, I have number 3, the bullpen catcher, Joel Polanco. He caught Mateo's home run ball.
Okay.
With a glove, not his hat.
Not his hat. Good strategy there to catch it with a glove.
Cedric Mullins for that grand slam in the 9th, even though it kind of killed the rally a little bit, but you're never not going to take a grand slam.
No. Home runs are king.
And then number 1 is Melanie Newman. She attended the game on her day off.
Very nice. That's dedication. One thing they mentioned earlier that I thought was interesting on the broadcast was that Kevin Brown said this was the first time in Major League history that center fielders on each team hit a grand slam. And that really just reminded me of how weird it was that interleague play didn't exist until the late 90s, because I would have thought back in the day you'd see like Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays or Duke Snyder or Joe DiMaggio, like two of those center fielders facing off against each other. I don't know how much all their careers overlapped, just kind of thinking out loud, but you would think that that might have happened before 2023.
Yeah, it used to be cool knowing that they never played each other except for All-Star games and World Series, but looking back, it made no sense whatsoever.
No, it's a very weird concept. It's basically like two half leagues.
With 2 different sets of rules.
Right. So that was a loss. That was kind of a bummer. But again, question for you. Going into the Red Sox series, it's in Baltimore. What would you have expected out of the 3 games as far as wins and losses go?
I think you have to be happy. I don't know what I would have expected. I'd definitely take the 2-1. Because the Red Sox just, they're in division rival. They're not as bad as we all want them to be. Like, they're probably going to finish 500 and possibly be in last place.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't asking you to, like, as a trick question. I totally think going into that series, I would have been happy with a 2-1 series victory. I wouldn't expect either team to sweep. And as far as the O's and Red Sox stack up, I would hope that the O's could take 2 of 3. And that brings us to Wednesday, because they did that with a 6-2 victory. Tyler Wells threw a lot of strikes, but still took him 102 pitches to get through 5.2 innings. But overall, he was good. Allowed 4 hits with 1 walk and 7 strikeouts.
You mean Siler Wells?
We're just going to do this all year, huh?
Anyone who has a name that rhymes with Cy at the beginning of their name, yeah, I can pull that off.
All right, I'll look forward to that. Hey, if they can play as well as it requires to have that joke made, that's great.
Yeah, because I'm definitely not making that joke about Dean Kramer.
Yeah, it doesn't rhyme either. Maybe that's why he's been bad. Needs to change his name. Yeah, but anyways, on Wednesday, the O's played a lot of small ball. They strung hits together. They had 2 sack bunts with runners on first and second to move them both over, and 3 sack flies overall. Okay, that's fine.
All right, so we had some technical difficulties. We're back now on the Red Sox Orioles game that the Orioles won 62 on Wednesday. We were talking about small ball. I was going to talk about Siler Wells at one point struck out 6 of 9, and he struck out the side in the fourth inning.
Yeah, he looked really good overall. Went back to the pattern of good starts that we saw last week and kind of broke the streak that Kramer and Bradish started against the Red Sox. Um, so it was good to see the O's wrap up that series with a victory. And also, we saw Cano end his streak of retiring batters at 24 straight by hitting Justin Turner. So it wasn't even a guy who got on base himself. Well, I guess technically he did,
He,
but Cano hit him with a pitch.
he had the pine tar on his back again, I noticed.
Yeah, and I still can't figure out how that happens. I was watching, trying to figure out what he does. Maybe it's part of his warm up routine in the on deck circle that we don't really see on TV. Because I couldn't figure out what he was doing to make that happen.
And then I had Urias was 4 for 4, 3 runs and an RBI. And did you see
Yeah,
Mullins stole a base on a pitch out?
yes, I did. He and Mateo are two of the fastest guys in the league, and they've both been pretty darn good so far. So that I think is a large part of how well the O's have been playing is those two guys setting the table and then stealing bases. I mean, between the two of them, they've got 20 stolen bases. The rest of the team has looks like 9.
Hmm.
So
How many does McKenna have? Do you have it right there?
in front of me, McKenna has
I don't remember him stealing one.
1, it says. This also, I have baseball reference up, and I'm not sure if they had updated it from today's game. So, not sure if McKenna had a steal because I didn't see it, which we'll get to in a minute, but that says 1 according to this site.
The only other note I have from this Wednesday game was Gunnar had like an odd flop dive at shortstop, and he appeared to cut his hand.
Yeah, I saw that. Doesn't seem to be much of an issue. I mean, can't really say that it's affected his hitting because he wasn't hitting well before that either. But yeah, glad that he didn't have to leave the game because that's when I think things start catching up to teams is when injuries start to pile up. And the O's have definitely had a few, especially with their pitching, guys who are starting the season injured. But luckily, I think they've been relatively healthy as far as the rest of the team goes.
Yeah, the very next play he took part in a 1-6-3 double play. So and I believe he batted right after that also.
Yep, he's good and healthy. Another note I have from that game is that Yoshida on the Sox is a good player. Wasn't really sure how he'd be. Seems like a lot of the imports are kind of hit or miss. For every Otani, there's Kosuke Fukudome who doesn't live up to their expectations, but he seems like a good player in the small bit I've seen.
Yeah, I've enjoyed watching him play in the 2 series they've had with the Red Sox. He's probably the only guy fun to watch on them.
And Verdugo, I like
Yeah,
Verdugo.
Verdugo. Everyone else is kind of
Devers
forgettable.
Devers is a good player, but I wouldn't say he's like super exciting to watch. Um, he's not a very good fielder. He's not a fast runner. He's just a big, strong, good hitter, which is not a bad thing. But as far as overall excitement in the game, doesn't really spark much.
All right, so that brings us into Thursday. Kyle Gibson versus Joey Wentz. This was Joey Ortiz debut game.
Yeah. Speaking of Joey Wentz, I think looked pretty good. He kind of outdueled Gibson. Gibson had a final line of 4.1 innings. Took him 102 pitches to get through it with 3 runs and 8 hits. So, kind of an uncharacteristic outing for him this season. But Joey Ortiz definitely helped, I guess, distract from Gibson's relatively poor performance with his first 3 RBIs. What would you think if you made your major league debut and your first two RBIs were like a chopper over first base? Would you kind of wish that it was a cleaner, harder hit, or
Uh,
would you just be like, "Damn, that was awesome that I just got two RBIs in a major league game"?
yeah, I would absolutely take whatever I could get. He got robbed in his first at bat from his first hit. I think it was Badu. He's kind of everywhere for the Tigers.
Yeah, he's a good fielder. Ortiz did hit one a little harder for the sac fly after that. Got his third RBI in his first game, which was awesome. Um, but yeah, I would take the hit too. I think some people care a lot about what things look like, but a run's a run, an RBI is an RBI, and that was a perfectly timed bounce right over. I think it was Torkelson at first, and had a really good debut.
Did you see he had a small patch on his sleeve that marked his debut?
Yeah, aren't they doing that for like trading cards?
Oh, that makes sense. Especially
I
the
think
rookies,
I
yeah.
Yeah, I think like Tops or whoever has people wearing those so they can take it and like cut it up and put it into cards. So I don't know. That's kind of weird. You would like to think that they get to keep their first jersey, but I don't know if they do that. Don't know how that works.
Were you surprised when you saw Ortiz called up?
I was a little surprised just because we had just talked about it. Um, I would have thought if they were looking for a middle infielder that they would go with Westberg because he's the only infielder in Norfolk who's been hitting better than Ortiz this year. But then I looked at the 40 man and saw that Westberg's not on it. He doesn't have to be yet. So Ortiz made more sense in that regard because you don't have to make a corresponding roster move.
I saw that too. Do you understand why he's not on the 40 man? Because I don't.
I think it has to do with his age or when he was drafted, or maybe both, where he just doesn't have to be on it yet. Like for this past year's Rule 5 draft, he wasn't eligible to be selected, I think. But I could be completely making that up. I'm not totally sure.
No, that was my thought as well. He made it to Norfolk way before Ortiz did, but yeah, I was surprised he got called up. I kind of wanted to see him stick around. I was hoping they would let him play second base. There's an opening there.
Yeah, I think Frazier hasn't been great, but I think he's been good enough. Um, he seems to be coming up big in situations that require a hit. Whereas overall, you look at Frazier's numbers and they're not very good, but seems like he comes up in the clutch, and I think he's probably just a good veteran to have around.
Yeah, they obviously added him for his veteran status because it's just him and Gibson really are the only veterans, and Coulomb.
They also don't have a lot of left-handed hitters in their lineup, as far as like the overall makeup of the roster is concerned. I might also be completely making that up, but that might be a reason that he's around. Unless that's false, just pretend I never said that.
Did you see Ortiz tell the base runner he was out at second?
Yeah, and I wondered, was he trying to be slick or did he actually think he was out? Because it seemed like everybody on the field thought he was actually out at second.
I had the same thought, and I think he was trying to be slick because as soon as he turned around, he raised his arms up, telling who probably Mountcastle to throw it to him.
Right, and they should have been able to get that guy out. I was kind of surprised they didn't.
And then
Uh,
Mountcastle was robbed of a home run by Kerry Carpenter. He's having some terrible luck.
yeah, and then Carpenter left the game with an injury. That was a really nice play. Yeah, as I saw on the broadcast today, they said that Mountcastle, or yesterday's game, Mountcastle is his expected batting average is like 304, but he was actually hitting 220 something. Just getting really bad luck, and that's just another example of it.
And then CNL Perez was bad again. He walked two and hit a batter.
Yep, and his inherited runner scored when Baker walked Mayton. His only out he got was Scope on a strikeout. But also Bauman, Aiken, and Bautista didn't allow any. How about Felix Bautista's outing?
Yeah, this was his 3 walk, 3 strikeout, 31 pitch outing. This was very
With
concerning.
no No runs allowed, 3 walks, and 3 Ks. I don't know if I've ever seen that in one inning from a reliever. I'm sure it's happened plenty of times, probably.
Yeah, I thought of Mitch Williams during this performance.
I only think of Joe Carter when I hear that guy's name.
Adley looked pretty concerned too. He kept, how they tell him to calm down with their glove. Yeah, he did that a few times.
Yeah, it looked like Bautista was lately. He's kind of been leaving fastballs up and his splitter low, and he's kind of having trouble finding the right height for both of those pitches. It seems like.
So Scope came up with the bases loaded and 1 out. And he has 0 RBI on the season.
Yeah, that's tough to do when you are actually playing consistently and you've played for a whole month.
And he was kind of known for his bat a little bit with Baltimore, and I don't know what he's known for
Right.
anymore.
And he made a pretty bad error, I want to say, in game 2 of the doubleheader on Saturday. So yeah, definitely not at his peak anymore, but I'll have fond memories of him as an Oriole.
I'll always remember him as a Norfolk Tide.
I have another item from that game. Kevin Brown, I may have misheard it and I went back and listened to it again just to see if I was imagining things, but Chasen Shreve came into the game and I swear I heard him say Shreve with a shrike to Adam Frazier when he threw a strike. Did you hear that? Am I making that up?
I didn't hear that if he did.
I went back and listened to it again. I was like, huh? But it definitely sounds like that's what he said. It was very silly. He's entertaining me with all his silly sayings throughout the year, and that was just another one.
Did you hear Jim Palmer ask Kevin Brown if he boxed? And Kevin Brown was like, "Do I look like I box?"
Yeah, and then they started talking about wrestling, right? and Jim Palmer said he took wrestling
Yeah.
in college. So yeah, that was interesting. I have another funny thing they talked about for the next game, but another note I have from Thursday is that Santander, as I mentioned, has been disappointing, but he did hit a home run, so that was good to see. Didn't really continue the momentum for the rest of the series, but good to see him at least show that he's still capable of that.
Yeah, that was basically his lone highlight of the season so far, I think.
Yeah, he hit that ball hard, and that led to a victory. So obviously, Friday there was no game due to weather, and that led to a double header on Saturday. The first game was a loss, 7-4. I only watched the highlights. I'm not gonna lie. I have family in town, and I didn't see either game live. And when I saw that they split, I went back and rewatched the victory, but not the loss. So I was a fair weather fan for this one.
So back to the Friday game real quick. The Tigers stranded 1 base runner every inning for 15 total left on base, and then 1 for 14 with runners in scoring position. Like you said, that's hard to do.
That's not going to get the job done.
And then Saturday, DL Hall was added as the 27th man for the doubleheader before the game, and they had a plan for him.
Yeah, watching the highlights, I saw that he cut his hair. But aside from that, how else did he look?
It was the full DL Hall experience. 3 innings, 5 hits, 7 Ks, 1 home run to Zach Short, who I mentioned earlier, 75 pitches, 49 strikes, 1 wild pitch, and 1 balk.
That is a full stat line, if there ever was one, for 3 innings.
He is going to drive everybody nuts, and he's going to break the fan base, I think.
What do you see as his future? As somebody who's seen him pitch a million times more than I have, is he gonna be a starter? It seems right now that he doesn't have the command that is required to be a starter.
Yeah, from what I've seen, I don't see how they can count on him to start. And I'm going back, for the past year, not just I've seen him way more in Norfolk than I have on TV for the Orioles. And yeah, 4 innings seems to be his max, and there's enough problems with that already.
Yeah, especially the way the O's starters have done overall this season. They don't need somebody else who can't get out of the fourth inning, fifth inning.
He's intriguing, so it sucks that I don't think they're going to get out of him what everybody wants to see from him. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he did get it to click, but I just don't see it happening anytime soon. He's already been in AAA for over a year now. He had a golden opportunity to stick around with this Saturday with Dean Kramer stinking again. That they could have just, and Kramer has an option left. I think I saw that you could have, since Hall was up. I think you just kind of slot him into the rotation now, at least for a couple turns, because Kramer's not getting it done either.
No, I wonder if they could even do kind of like Tampa does with the opener and start Hall and only plan on him going like two or three, and then you put Kramer or somebody else in. I know that's probably not the best way to use a roster spot, the way that the Orioles prefer to do things, but as you said, if you can't count on him, you don't want to put him out there without a plan in place. But at the same time, he's clearly got a lot of talent, and he's in kind of a weird spot where a guy like him with the talent he has might normally be a setup man, maybe a closer eventually, but he was a starter and has been in the minors for most of his career. So you don't necessarily want to put him into that role and not at least see what he can do for you as a starter.
When they called him up last season for that start in Tampa, I was surprised he got called up. And I got the feeling that they didn't call him up because he had earned it. I got the feeling they called him up because they wanted to see firsthand why he hasn't been able to just have complete starts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I'm curious how many people start their career and have, you know, how long has he been in the minors? Like 4 years, maybe? It's been a while. And how many people have command issues and actually put it together and suddenly become a pitcher who doesn't walk a lot of guys? I'd imagine that's not super common.
And then I saw a bunch of references too that his fastball was down to like the mid 90s, which makes sense if he's trying to control it better.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, we'd all like to see him be a star, but he might be best suited as kind of a stud long relief guy who might be able to give you two or three innings and have that electric arm that maybe a closer typically would have.
Yeah, he was a Duquette draft pick. Yeah, I hope he can turn it together because when he's on, he's fun to watch, but he will drive you nuts. I've never left a start at Harbor Park that he made and felt good about it. Like maybe one time, but the rest of the time. So when he first got called up, I was like, cool, another prospect for the Tides. And I went to the game and he did his 70 pitches over 4 inning thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it happened again, and it happened again, and it happened again. And I was like, I don't know how to tell you guys this, but DL Hall might not be who we want him to be.
Well, speaking of driving you nuts, Dean Kramer allowed 11 hits over 5 innings. He gave up 9 line drives in 5 innings. I mean, people were just shelling him in that start.
Yeah, that was game one. I almost went to do yard work because it was so bad, but I stuck through it.
Well, they did come back and made it a game at least, despite the Tigers getting out to a 3-run lead. One thing I noticed was you know, I don't know if there's a Orioles uniform tracker anywhere, but I don't recall them wearing orange yet this season. And it was nice to see them wear those orange jerseys. I like those a lot.
Yeah, the Orioles have some great uniforms. They can't miss.
No, those were nice. We had Orioles legend Eduardo Rodriguez getting the win for the Tigers. He's now at a 2.21 ERA so far. We were just talking about him getting traded for Andrew Miller recently. So he looked good and Kramer didn't, and that's usually going to mean the O's lose.
I saw Ryan O'Hearn played right field. I questioned if he could play the outfield when he first got called up, so I was happy to. I don't think they trust him out there, but I was happy to see that in a pinch they could put him out there.
Yeah, I mean, Santander usually plays right, and I don't think he's particularly good at defense either. So I don't think there's a big drop off with him. As I mentioned before, O'Hearn looks athletic. He's a big dude, but he's pretty lean. I don't really think he can be that much worse than Santander. So if they want to give that guy a break, put ORBIs out there.
And Mateo homered to just make it close enough to keep things interesting, but they still lost.
Yeah, I have a note about Mateo. I looked this morning. The only other player in the league with at least 5 homers and 10 steals is Jazz Chisholm with the Marlins. Last year, he was an all star, and he's on the cover of MLB The Show this year. So maybe next year it'll be Jorge Mateo.
Yeah, they moved him to Chisholm to the outfield this season.
Yeah, I believe they traded for Arias
Mm-hmm.
from the Twins. I think he might be at second now. Is that why they moved him out to, I think, center?
Yeah, they moved him to center. I don't know who's playing second for them. I haven't seen any Marlins games.
No, I can't say I ever think about the Marlins really.
Speaking of uniforms, people were happy to see the Marlins wearing their throwbacks the other night.
I love those. So my grandparents lived in Florida. My grandfather has since passed away, but when I was a kid, the Marlins were, won that World Series in '97, and he bought me a bunch of Marlins gear. So I always look back and see those teal and black and silver, and just it's a lot of nostalgia for me. But I think those are really nice.
Yeah, those are nice. They botched that first rebrand they tried when they signed all those free agents. I think it was like 2011. They hired Ozzie Guillen. And they went to that Orange M when they first went to by the name Miami.
Yeah, I always think of Jose Fernandez when I see those uniforms.
I just
That
watched.
guy was electric.
Yeah, I just watched something on him recently.
Oh yeah, is there like a documentary or something about him?
I don't know where I saw it. But
Maybe it was like a YouTube video or
yeah, it was
something.
probably a YouTube video. Oh, speaking of things that documentaries I watched during the rainout game, I made time to watch that Reggie Jackson documentary.
Oh yeah, how was that?
It's riveting. It's an hour and 45 minutes and it just flies by, which says a lot for a documentary. Sometimes they peter out and yeah, this thing will keep you entertained the whole time. Even non-baseball fans will like it.
How many minutes did they spend on his one season in Baltimore?
Not
Like
very many.
2.
Yeah, I could have used more of that. He did look weird in an Orioles uniform.
Yeah, I think of him as a Yankee first and foremost, but obviously Oakland. But I think I've seen pictures of him with like these really old aviator style glasses with the Orioles. Just kind of funny looking.
Yeah, the cover of the movie is pretty cool looking. He has the silver aviators on.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out for sure. Do you have any other notes? I have one more on this game, but I'll let you go first.
No, I don't have anything for game one.
The only other note I have is that McCann hit his second home run. He has 31 plate appearances now, whereas last year Robinson Chirinos had 4 home runs in 220 plate appearances. So, not that that really means a lot right now, but I think McCann, so far at least, has provided more offense than Chirinos, which is what I think a lot of people were looking for in his replacement this year.
I saw somebody had a tweet. It said top 3 catchers of baseball. Number 1, Adley Rutschman. Number 2, James McCann. And number 3, JT Realmuto.
Yes, sounds exactly right.
The Mets just gave him away.
Yeah, I think literally, right? Aren't they paying a good chunk of his salary?
Yeah, if you're gonna pay that much, like you should have just kept him.
I don't even know who the Mets catcher is, let alone their backup.
Yeah, I think it's a rookie.
I haven't watched. Is it what's the name? Alvarez, maybe? He's like a big prospect. think he's supposed to be pretty good,
The,
whoever it is, if I'm getting that name right.
speaking of catching prospects, the Pirates have a bunch somehow. They have the number one pick a
You,
few years ago,
oh,
Henry Davis.
Henry Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was in school in Boston, I would go to BC once in a while and watch them play baseball because it was free. You didn't even have to buy a ticket, and they were in the ACC, so you could see some good teams roll through. I remember seeing Matt Harvey pitch for North Carolina. I saw Buster Posey as a shortstop his freshman year for Florida State. He hit a home run. I didn't even know who he was at the time, but I remember just thinking Buster Posey was kind of a funny name. And now he'll be in the Hall of Fame eventually. But BC had a catcher. I want to say his name was Tony Sanchez,
Oh, I
and
remember him.
he got picked like 4th overall by the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
So that reminded me of him. I wouldn't have thought of Tony Sanchez for a long time.
So I'm looking at the Mets catchers. They are a disaster. Alvarez is
Huh.
7 for 38, 7 for 36, 194, 1 home run, 2 RBI. His OPS is 494. And then their other catcher is Thomas Nito. He is 5 for 43, 1 RBI. He's hitting 116, 14 strikeouts, 2 walks.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were right. They probably should have just paid McCann to play for the Mets instead of the Orioles.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense. Especially if you have a young catcher like Alvarez. Who better to learn from?
I guess Nito, they thought.
Not Nito.
All right. Well, that was a loss, 7-4. Game 2 on Saturday was a 6-4 win, and this was a Grayson Rodriguez start. He looked very good, huh?
Yes, he was phenomenal. He showed out. He retired 14 in a row, gave up a leadoff double, and he had no hit stuff after that. Struck out 7 of 8 on strikeouts at one point.
Yeah, he was great. 5 innings, 1 walk, 9 Ks, 91 pitches. I guess in a perfect world, you'd like him to get a little further in the game than 5 innings, but for a rookie, I'm not going to complain. That was by far his best start so far, and he looked like he belonged in the majors for sure.
Yeah, he was upset they took him out. I wrote down nothing on this game. The only thing I wrote down was the 3 stars, which was McKenna 2 for 4, 2 runs, 3 RBI, and a home run.
Mm-hmm.
Then Grayson, who we just went over, and then the popcorn kid. Did you see the popcorn kid?
I remember seeing a dad and his kid, Orioles fans, and the kid was eating popcorn. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, he was just glued to the game. He couldn't take his eyes off it. He was just shoveling popcorn in his mouth.
Hey, well, it was a good game for them to go to in Detroit. There was another fan who had a Joe Orsolak jersey, which I thought was funny.
Wow.
Because I just brought him up last episode, and then I looked at his numbers. I thought, was Joe Ursulak really that good? And his average season was like 6 homers and 40 RBIs. So it was a pretty obscure jersey for a guy to be wearing to a game.
Yeah, that has to be custom. I remember Orsolak was on the team for a while, but I don't think he really did too much.
No, I just think Orsolak's kind of a cool name. So that's really what sticks out most to me.
Joey O.
I did take some other notes. One of my favorite plays of the year so far was when Mateo tagged McKinstry in the first inning. So McKinstry led off with a double, as you mentioned, off Rodriguez, and then there was that ground ball to short, and Henderson had ranged to his left, so third base was empty, and McKinstry tried to beat Mateo to third base, which, not a guy to try to beat in the foot race. And I also liked how Henderson stopped and got out of the way so Mateo could make a beeline to third, and he tagged him out. I thought that was highly entertaining.
Yeah, when you said tagged, I was picturing second base, and I was like, I don't remember that. But yeah, that was heads up. He just went right towards him.
Right. Against most other people, that probably would he probably would have made it to third safely, and he would have looked really smart. But he, I guess, thought he was faster or forgot it was Jorge Mateo, and he was toast, and it was cool.
Yeah, the Tigers are a disaster. I was looking at so they drafted Casey Mize, number 1 overall. He's done nothing. Torkelson has done nothing. Riley Green was a top 5 pick. He's done nothing. And then they
He
gave
looked okay. He looked okay in that game. In that game too, actually, I think he had a couple hits.
yeah,
But
he just looks
overall, this year he hasn't done a whole lot.
yeah, he just looks serviceable, and you don't want that from a top 5 pick. Um,
No.
who else? Oh, they gave Baez all that money. We already talked about Scope really not doing anything. They're a mess. They
Yeah.
are a mess.
Baez, for all the hype he got as a Cub and winning the World Series and stuff, I've never been a big fan of his game. Like, he has no plate discipline. He's just kind of all over the place. He's fun to watch. He's got a lot of energy, and I mean, he did in Chicago. I feel like Detroit's kind of sucked the life out of him, but he's just not the guy he used to be. Speaking of second baseman, though, Joey Ortiz got his fourth RBI, so he's obviously had a great start. Just got sent back down today, I believe, but did not do anything to make the O's think he can't stick around next time they call him up.
Yeah, I already mentioned I kind of wanted to see him get a shot at some regular playing time. They called up Stowers. They needed an extra outfielder. Yeah, we already talked about it. They're squeezed. I don't know. Like they got to make room for Westberg somehow, even on just the 40 man, if they want to call him up.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about injuries, though.
Mm.
Eventually, that'll catch up. Somebody's going to get hurt, and it stinks, but no team ever goes unscathed throughout a season.
Yeah,
So that'll happen. That'll open up a spot. Maybe somebody gets traded at the deadline, like they did last year with Mancini and Lopez, which not everybody saw those coming. It wasn't super shocking, but maybe they'll make a deal like that again that is maybe semi surprising.
speaking of injuries, with the way the rotation has gone, John Means should be back at some point, and I think we're going to have unrealistic expectations for him.
Yeah, he's a good guy to pair with Hall. You put
Ooh.
in Hall or Means for like 3-4 innings and let the other one come in for the same. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, I'll send the Orioles a tweet, see if they respond to it.
Yeah, I'm sure Elias and Sig will get right on it.
They're manning the account. Sig was just on the Adam Jones podcast last week.
I haven't listened to it, but I did see that he was a guest. I'm sure he's an interesting guy to listen to. He's clearly very smart.
And then on to Sunday, you weren't able to watch today's game?
Yeah, I couple quick notes though on
Okay.
Saturday. Just random things. One, we mentioned the ubiquity of gambling ads recently, and behind the plate in Detroit, it says PointsBet and FanDuel 8 times each, just covered on that green padding, and you're just staring at it the whole game. So I thought that was a good example of what we were talking about. Another thing I liked was back to the announcers when there was that building under construction in center field, and Kevin Brown asked McDonald, "What do you think that is?" And Ben McDonald said, "Looks like a building." It just cracked me up. Like, what do you think it is? Of course, it's a building. So that made me laugh. And the last thing, I tried to type out Bauman on my phone, and it autocorrected to Batman.
Ooh.
And he gave up a 3-run homer to Nevin, as we mentioned earlier. So that was not necessarily a bright spot for Bauman, but he's been so good this year that I'm not worried about that.
That's a good nickname for him, though.
Yeah, I mean, if he keeps playing well, you can't be called Batman if you stink. But right now, I think he's earned it.
Or if you're a pitcher, like Batman would be more of a hitting nickname.
That's true. Like Homer Bailey, you don't want to be named that when you're a pitcher.
I have a weird Homer Bailey story. He so he was
Let's hear it.
he was a big prospect with the Reds, and he was pitching for Louisville against the Tides, and there was some psycho Reds fan in the crowd where Homer Bailey was really struggling in this start, and Ted Power, former relief pitcher, it was the pitching coach for Louisville, and he went out to the mound to talk to Homer Bailey, and just this fan is screaming, and he's just like, "His release point's off, Ted."
Just telling him how to analyze his pitchers.
I've never forgotten it.
I thought you were going to say Ted yelled at him to shut the F up.
No, he's just screaming, his release point's off.
It'd be funny if that was like Homer Bailey's dad. I've watched him throw 1,000 innings in my life.
You know what?
I know him. I know Homer when I see him.
That would make sense, the way this guy was acting. Because he was very concerned about Homer Bailey out there.
That's funny. Well, Homer Bailey, didn't he throw a no-hitter or a perfect game or something?
I don't know. I know he flopped.
Yeah, he didn't have a great career overall, but I feel like he did something impressive at one point. But anyways, that's all I've got on Saturday.
He,
And yeah, Sunday I didn't watch, so you can drive.
okay, so Orioles won. I noticed Spencer Turnbull started for the Tigers, and I noticed that I have to believe that the Tigers lead the league in Spencers with Torkelson and Turnbull.
I'm sure that's easy to look up if you have like access to a SQL database or something of all MLB players.
Speaking of Spencers, Spencer Watkins got hurt at the one Tides game I was at. There was a play at the plate, and he awkwardly covered the plate and like fell down, and then he left the start with a lacerated finger. So I don't know if he'll be able to make a spot start if they need him soon.
Well, as far as injuries go, at least that one sounds minor.
The Tide scored 20 runs again the other night in a 7-inning game.
Man, that's impressive.
I think they could win the AL Central.
Is that like when people say whoever the worst NFL team is that Alabama could beat them every year?
And then I looked up Turnbull. In 2019, he was 3-17 with a 4.61 ERA.
That's not a good ERA, but that's horrendous luck, I guess.
Yeah, 3-17. I know wins and losses don't mean as much as they used to, but that is a tough look.
Uh-huh. That'll happen when you're on the Tigers, I guess. Who was that Tigers pitcher back in the day?
Oh, Mike
He
Maroth.
lost like 20. Yes. Didn't he lose 20 games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just fed him to the wolves.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really have much on today's game either. The stuff I have written down, we already talked about. Bradish he was cruising until the fifth, and then they caught up to him. He got pulled after only 78 pitches because everything just fell apart.
Yeah, hopefully he gets it together. He's certainly shown that he's capable, so I don't know. It seems like a lot of their pitchers this year are having command issues. I don't really know why that is, but they need to throw more strikes. And even if you're giving up runs, just go deeper into games so the relievers don't have to throw so much.
And then the bullpen was great. Cianel Perez came in and struck out the only batter he faced on 4 pitches. Austin Voth was pretty good today. 2 innings, 2 strikeouts. He was able to bridge to Coulomb, and then Cano got the save. 11 pitches, 9 strikes, 2 strikeouts. I already touched on my Batista theory that maybe he's looking over his shoulder a little bit, trying to do too much.
He could be. Cano got his second save of the year, still isn't allowed an earned run. Can't ask for anything better than that. Definitely the biggest surprise, I think.
And then my 3 stars were Cano, just went over him. Mountcastle got his first RBI, an extra base hit in 2 weeks, and scored a run.
Man.
And then my first star is the Masson app.
Oh, a good day with the app, huh?
Yep. I tagged along with my wife to the Apple store, and it took way longer than we initially thought it would. So I downloaded the app on my phone. I signed in with my parents' DirecTV password, and I was able to watch the first 4 innings while sitting at the Genius Bar.
I guess that's one way to pass the time at the Genius Bar.
Yeah, the Masson app. I got to give it credit today. It came through.
I watch the games on MLB TV, and I do have one gripe with that app, and it's kind of a silly one. But when I go back and rewatch a game, I use the 30-second fast forward button all the time, like in between batters, in between innings, when there's a mound visit, whatever. And the button, though, when I have it on my iPad is really small, and it's hard for me to like press it accurately. I end up missing the 30-second button all the time. So I'm like sitting there tapping the screen, looking like an idiot, and I can't hit the 30-second button. And it just kind of bothers me. I wish it was larger or easier to get to at least.
Yeah, so I was imagining the Roku app when you said you watch on the MLB. I almost feel like the Roku app is too good.
Yeah, I thought about downloading it on the TV, but with our kids, they watch Sesame Street all the time, and it's just easier for me to sit there on my iPad while they're watching something else than for me to put the baseball game up. But yeah,
You got to take one for the team.
right, and that's fine. No worries about that. But um, yeah, the reason I didn't watch the game today at all was because I went to the Rangers game against the Yankees. And as a non-Yankee fan, it was a great time because the Rangers won 15-2, and there were, I think, at least 4 home runs, including a grand slam in the top of the first that, or not top, the bottom of the first that we actually missed on the way in. We could hear the announcers, because they have all these sports bars and they have the game playing outside, say bases loaded with 1 out, and I said, I wonder who's up right now. And then like a minute later we heard the crowd go crazy for the grand slam by Josh Young, and the route was on. So it was nice to see the Yankees get whooped.
The picture you sent, the roof was open. Is it open most times you go?
Yeah, I'd say most times. The main time the roof will be closed is obviously when it's raining, but also when it's super hot outside. So April in Texas is bearable, but once you get to July, August, September, it gets super hot, and they'll close it for day games especially.
So,
But it was a beautiful day for baseball.
yeah, you can't. Yeah, just watch a baseball on a Sunday in spring like this. It's perfect. Like I had off yesterday, Saturday. I don't get too many Saturdays off, and I was able to watch both games.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it was great. It was went with my dad and my sister and her boyfriend, and spent most of the game just chatting and wandering around the stadium. We weren't super in tune with the game, and we didn't have to be. It was still a great time.
That's what most people don't understand when you ask them to go to a game. They're like, I don't like baseball. And you're like, it really has nothing to do with baseball.
Right. It's like, do you like being outside and eating hot dogs?
Yeah.
Then you should come.
I guarantee you you'll have fun.
No, it was good.
So the Orioles are off on Monday. Then they got the Royals for 3 games in Kansas City. I saw the pitching matchups. I believe it's Thursday's game. The Orioles haven't named a starter yet.
Okay. I wonder whose turn that is without actually looking it up.
Okay, so it has Wells for Tuesday. This is the ESPN app. Gibson for Wednesday, and then it has Grayson for Thursday. But I saw something that said TBA online.
Huh. Well, I guess if Grayson pitched Saturday, yeah, that would be the 5th day. So I think that makes sense.
And then after
And that's,
the Royals, shit gets real.
yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. That's the last easy series they have. Um, God, for the whole rest of the month of May is teams that are at least decent to good.
Yeah, they don't see someone with a losing record until May 29th. That's Memorial Day. That's Cleveland, who is 13-15, and they're traditionally pretty good even when they're not.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll know more about how the Orioles actually are overall after the month of May, because we'll see them play some good teams. And honestly, if they get, I saw today that they won 18 games in April, and that's a club record. If they get out of May with a 500 record for the month, so, staying 10ish games over 500, I would be pleasantly surprised. I don't know about you.
If they could find a way to sweep Tampa Bay, that would be great.
You think they're going to? Okay.
No, I don't think they
It
will.
would be Okay, I was gonna say it would be nice if that happened, but I don't see that happening.
They would be a half game back if you went by today's records and didn't count the games in between them and Tampa. So a sweep would go a long way towards hanging with them.
Yeah, well, we'll see how they are against good teams, and they've done what they were supposed to do against a pretty weak schedule so far that continues in Kansas City. But then, as you said, it gets real for the month of May. So we'll see what happens. But I can't complain about how they've been so far, and I have no reason to think they'll at least be competitive with these teams.
The three projected starters for the Royals are a combined 0 and 12. They all have ERAs over
Okay,
6.
that bodes well for the O's.
And our old friend Jordan Lyles will be making a start.
Jordan Lyles. Maybe is he facing Gibson? We can actually see who's better.
Oh, that'd be nice. That has him listed as facing Grayson, but I think that's the TBA game. I'm sure ESPN just plugs the rotations in and then automatically puts a probable starter in there.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. But another good week. Can't complain, and it'll be fun to see some teams that aren't the Tigers and the Red Sox for a while.
Yeah, especially the Tigers. That's all I got. I think we're done here. Do you have any apologies?
Let's see. Pull up my list. Next one, Manny Alexander. Big shortstop prospect that never did much.
Yeah, didn't make it. I remember him. And then yeah,
How
mine
about
is
you?
the 2017 NLCS MVP Justin Turner. He spent 21 games with the O's in 09 and 2010. And nowadays he's
Mm-hmm.
mostly known for being the only player to ever reach base on Cano.
Yes, and having pine tar all over his back. Someday we'll get to the bottom of that. All right. Well, another good week of O's baseball. Hopefully, we'll be back here in a week to discuss some more victories. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yep. See you later, everybody.
All right. Take care, everyone.